My name is Ethan Jarrett, and I used to think I knew my wife. 10 years of marriage, 2 beautiful kids, and a house in the suburbs outside Boston that we'd painted together room by room. I'm a product design engineer. Nothing glamorous, but it pays well enough for Vanessa to work part-time at her law firm, and for us to take the kids to Disney World every other year. Thursday evening started like any other. Dylan, our 9-year-old, was sprawled on the living room carpet building, something elaborate with Legos, while 6-year-old Chloe colored at the coffee table, her tongue poking out in concentration. The smell of leftover pizza hung in the air, and I was mentally preparing for another evening of homework supervision and bedtime negotiations. Then Vanessa walked downstairs. She was wearing the black dress, the one she'd bought for our anniversary last year but had never worn. Her dark hair was styled in loose waves, and she'd applied makeup with the kind of precision she usually reserved for court appearances. The scent of her expensive perfume, the one I'd given her for Christmas, filled the room. "Going somewhere special?" I asked, looking up from Dylan's Lego masterpiece. "Out," she replied, checking her reflection in the hallway mirror. Something in her tone made my stomach tighten. "Out where?" "Just out, Ethan." She was applying lipstick now, the deep red shade she only wore for special occasions. "With who?" She paused, the lipstick tube frozen halfway to her mouth. In the mirror, I could see her eyes narrow slightly. "Does it matter?" "Well, yeah. It's Thursday night. The kids have school tomorrow and we usually—" "My ex is in town," she said, cutting me off. Her voice was casual, like she was discussing the weather. The words hit me like a physical blow. "Your ex-boyfriend?" She nodded, still focused on her reflection. "Michael. He's here for business." "Vanessa, that's completely inappropriate. You're married. We have children." She whirled around, and for a moment, I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before, a cold determination that made my blood run cold. "I'll cheat once," she snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Don't make it a problem." The room went silent, except for the soft scratching of Chloe's crayons. I could feel both kids' eyes on us, sensing the tension even if they didn't understand it. "You need to understand me," Vanessa continued, her voice taking on a demanding tone I'd never heard before. "I deserve this." I stood there, speechless, watching my wife of 10 years dismiss our entire marriage in a single sentence. She grabbed her purse from the counter, checked her phone, and headed for the door. "Vanessa, wait!" The front door slammed so hard it rattled the windows. I stood in the sudden silence, processing what had just happened. 10 years of marriage, dismissed instantly. Dylan looked up at me with worried eyes. "Dad? Where did Mom go?" She went to see an old friend," I managed, my voice sounding strange even to my own ears. The next few hours passed in a blur. I got the kids ready for bed, reading Chloe her bedtime story and helping Dylan finish his math homework, all while my mind raced. After they were asleep, I sat on our couch, the one we'd picked out together at that furniture store in Cambridge, and tried to make sense of what had happened. Finally, I picked up my phone and called Vanessa's parents. "Ethan?" Margaret's voice was warm and familiar. "How are you, dear?" "Hi, Margaret. I need to tell you something, and I'm not sure how to say this." "What's wrong? Are the children okay?" "The kids are fine. It's about Vanessa. She left tonight to meet her ex-boyfriend. She said she was going to cheat and that I needed to understand her." The silence on the other end stretched so long, I thought the call had dropped. "She said what?" Margaret's voice was barely a whisper. "She said she deserved it, that she'd cheat once and I shouldn't make it a problem." "Oh my God, Ethan, I'm so sorry. I don't understand. This isn't how we raised her." After hanging up with Vanessa's horrified parents, I called my own. My mother listened quietly, then said simply, "What do you need us to do?" "Can you take the kids tomorrow? I have a feeling things are going to get complicated." "Of course. We'll pick them up first thing in the morning." Then I made the most important call of the night. I'd never met Julia Turner, but I knew Michael was married. It had taken me 20 minutes of searching social media to find her number. My hands shook as I dialed. Hello? Her voice was tired, like she'd been asleep. Hi, this is Ethan Jarrett. I know this is going to sound strange, but we need to talk. My wife just left to meet your husband. She told me she was going to cheat. The sharp intake of breath on the other end told me everything I needed to know. He said he was at a work dinner, she whispered. They lied to both of us. Can you come over? We need to compare notes. An hour later, Julia Turner sat in my kitchen. She was a nurse, she'd told me, with kind eyes and calloused hands that spoke of long shifts and hard work. She'd thrown on jeans and a sweater, her blonde hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Show me what you found, I said, pouring coffee with hands that weren't quite steady. She pulled out her phone. I started looking after you called. Michael's been acting strange for weeks. Look at this. The text messages made my stomach turn. Weeks of planning, secret phone calls, hotel reservations. This wasn't a spontaneous reunion. It was a calculated affair. Here, I said, showing her Vanessa's credit card statements on my laptop. The Marriott downtown? 3 weeks ago, she said she was working late. The same hotel, Julia said quietly. The same night Michael said he was in Providence for a conference. We spent the night piecing together the betrayal. Every lie, every excuse, every time they'd looked us in the eye and deceived us. Julia cried quietly while I felt a cold anger settling in my chest, like ice. By 3 a.m., we were both exhausted but wide awake. Julia had called her sister to watch her kids, and we'd made coffee twice. The kitchen table was covered with printed emails, credit card statements, and phone records. What do we do now? She asked. We wait, I said, and we prepare. Dawn was breaking over our quiet suburban street when we heard the front door open. Julia and I looked at each other across the kitchen table, where we'd spent the last 8 hours documenting our spouse's betrayal. The evidence was spread before us like a roadmap of lies. Vanessa's footsteps were unsteady on the hardwood floor. I could hear her trying to be quiet, probably hoping to sneak upstairs before I woke up. She had no idea what was waiting for her. She appeared in the kitchen doorway, and the sight of her made my chest tight with a mixture of rage and disgust. Her black dress was wrinkled, her carefully applied makeup smeared. The smell of alcohol and regret hung around her like a cloud, mixed with a cologne that definitely wasn't mine. She took 2 steps into the kitchen before she saw Julia sitting at our table. Vanessa froze mid-step, her bloodshot eyes darting between us. What is she doing here? She stammered, the alcohol haze clearing fast as reality hit. Comparing notes, I replied calmly, gesturing to the papers spread across the table. About our cheating spouses, Julia added, her voice steady despite the tears I'd seen her cry hours earlier. I watched the color drain from Vanessa's face as she realized what we'd discovered. Her confidence, that cold certainty she'd displayed when she walked out, evaporated like morning mist. How long has she been here? Vanessa asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I checked my watch. About 8 hours. We've had a very productive night. We know everything, Julia said, picking up a stack of printed text messages. Every lie, every plan, every hotel reservation. Vanessa's legs seemed to give out. She grabbed the doorframe for support, staring at the evidence of her affair laid out like a prosecutor's case. It was a mistake, she said, the words tumbling out. I was drunk and stupid and— You said you'd cheat once, I interrupted, throwing her own words back at her. Don't make it a problem, remember? Ethan, please. You were sober when you planned it, Julia said, holding up her phone. Look at these messages from 2 weeks ago. Can't wait to see you again. Book the usual room. This wasn't a mistake, Vanessa. This was premeditated. I stood up slowly, feeling calmer than I had any right to feel. The kids are at my parents' house. I sent them away before our little chat. The panic that flashed across Vanessa's face was almost satisfying. The children? Ethan, you can't. I can and I did. I picked up the manila envelope from the counter. Divorce papers. Julia has hers too. Vanessa stared at the envelope like it was a loaded gun. You can't be serious. One mistake and you're throwing away 10 years. One mistake? Julia laughed, but there was no humor in it. Your husband has been lying to me for months. They've been planning this affair like a military operation. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a screenshot. Here's my favorite text from Michael to you. Tell Ethan you're working late again. I've got champagne. That was last Tuesday, Vanessa, when you said you had a brief to finish. She was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks in black streams. I never meant for this to happen. I love you. I love our family. You loved us so much you threw us away for a weekend with your ex-boyfriend, I said. Someone you haven't seen in 15 years. It wasn't supposed to mean anything, she sobbed. It was just... I felt trapped, like I was missing out on something. Michael reached out and it felt like a chance to remember who I used to be. Who you used to be, I repeated, before you had a family, before you had children who depend on you. Julia stood up, gathering her papers. I should go. My lawyer wants to see me at 9. Wait, Vanessa said desperately. Can't we work this out? Both of us? Our kids? They'll be devastated. You should have thought about that before you decided to understand yourself in a hotel room, Julia said coldly. After Julia left, Vanessa and I sat in silence in our kitchen. The morning sun streamed through the windows, illuminating the evidence of her betrayal still scattered across the table. The kids will ask questions, she said finally. Yes, they will. And I'll tell them the truth in an age-appropriate way. That their mother made choices that hurt our family. Ethan, please. I know I messed up, but we can fix this. Marriage counseling, whatever you want. What I want, I said, standing up and gathering the papers, is for you to pack a bag and stay at your parents' house while we figure out custody arrangements. You're really going to do this? Destroy our family over one night? I looked at her, really looked at her, and tried to remember when I'd fallen in love with this woman. When had she become someone who could look me in the eye and tell me she deserved to cheat? I didn't destroy our family, Vanessa. You did. The moment you walked out that door last night, you made your choice. She left an hour later with a suitcase and red eyes, driving to her parents' house in the Honda we'd bought together 3 years ago. I watched from the window as she backed out of our driveway, probably for the last time as my wife. Then I called my lawyer. The next few days passed in a surreal blur of lawyer meetings, family phone calls, and the strange quiet of a house missing half its inhabitants. My parents had taken Dylan and Chloe to their place in New Hampshire for what we'd told them was an extended weekend visit. I wasn't ready to explain to my children why their mother wasn't coming home. Julia and I had formed an unlikely alliance, bound together by betrayal and a shared desire for justice. She'd taken time off from her nursing job at Mass General to deal with the fallout, and we met daily to coordinate our response. Michael's been calling nonstop, she told me over coffee at a diner near my office, begging me to reconsider, saying it was just a midlife crisis. Vanessa's trying a different approach, I said, stirring sugar into my coffee. She's telling everyone who'll listen that I'm being unreasonable, that marriages go through rough patches and I'm overreacting. Are you having second thoughts? I considered the question seriously. 3 days ago, if someone had told me I'd be sitting in a diner planning my divorce, I would have laughed. But watching Vanessa walk out that door, hearing her casual dismissal of our marriage, had changed something fundamental in me. No, I said finally. I keep thinking about what she said. I deserve this. Like our marriage was a prison sentence she'd served long enough. Julia nodded. Michael said something similar, that he'd given me the best years of his life and deserved to remember what passion felt like. The best years of his life, while you were working double shifts to put him through business school. Exactly. She pulled out her phone. I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about making sure people know the truth. I'd suggested that we get ahead of the narrative. Vanessa was already spinning the story to her friends, painting herself as a woman trapped in a loveless marriage who'd made one mistake. I knew her well enough to know she'd convince half our social circle that I was the villain in this story. What did you have in mind? Michael's business partner, David, is having a barbecue this weekend. Big annual thing, all their clients, investors, the whole network. Michael will be there, probably with some story about how we're taking a break. You want to show up? I want to show up with evidence. Let people see exactly what kind of man they're doing business with. The plan was simple, but effective. Julia would attend the barbecue as planned. She'd been invited months ago, and I would come as her date. When Michael inevitably confronted us, we'd be ready with printed copies of his text messages, hotel receipts, and a timeline of his lies. Are you sure about this? I asked. Once we do this, there's no going back. It'll be nuclear. They went nuclear first, Julia said. We're just returning fire. Saturday afternoon, I picked up Julia at her house in Brookline. She'd dressed carefully, not too formal, not too casual, in a blue sundress that made her look confident and approachable. I'd chosen khakis and a button-down shirt, the kind of outfit that said trustworthy suburban dad. Ready? I asked as we pulled up to David's sprawling colonial. Let's end this, she said. The barbecue was in full swing when we arrived. The backyard was filled with couples and families, kids running around with sparklers while adults clustered around picnic tables laden with food. It was the kind of scene Vanessa and I had been part of dozens of times. Suburban success on display. Michael spotted us immediately. He was standing near the grill with David and another man I didn't recognize, a beer in his hand and a confident smile on his face. The smile faltered when he saw Julia walking toward him with a stranger. Julia? His voice carried across the yard. What are you doing here? Enjoying the party, she said pleasantly. David, thank you so much for having us. This is my friend Ethan. I shook David's hand, noting how Michael's face had gone pale. Great to meet you. Beautiful house. Michael, Julia continued, her voice still perfectly pleasant. I don't think you've met Ethan. His wife Vanessa is an old friend of yours, I believe. The beer bottle slipped from Michael's hand, shattering on the patio. Conversations around us began to quiet as people sensed drama brewing. Julia, we should talk privately. Oh, I think we've talked enough, she said, pulling out her phone. In fact, I've been sharing some of our conversations with Ethan. Would you like to hear your favorite? The one where you told me you were in Providence while you were actually booking hotel rooms with his wife? David looked confused. Michael, what's going on? It's complicated, Michael said, his voice tight with panic. Actually, it's quite simple, I said, pulling out the folder we'd prepared. Your business partner has been having an affair with my wife. They've been planning it for weeks, lying to both their spouses, and using company trips as cover stories. The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel eyes turning toward us from across the yard. These are copies of the hotel receipts, Julia said, handing papers to David. The Marriott downtown, charged to Michael's company credit card. The same nights he told me he was traveling for business. Michael, David's voice was dangerously quiet. Please tell me this isn't what it looks like. It's not what you think. It's exactly what we think, I interrupted. And if you'd like to verify any of this information, I'm happy to provide contact information for our lawyers. Michael lunged toward me then, his face red with rage and embarrassment. You bastard! You can't... He never finished the sentence. In his anger, he'd forgotten about the broken beer bottle at his feet. His designer loafers slipped on the wet glass, and he went down hard on the patio, his white polo shirt tearing on the rough concrete. The party guests stared in stunned silence as Michael struggled to his feet, his shirt ruined and his dignity in tatters. I think we've made our point, Julia said quietly. David, thank you for the lovely party. We left Michael sitting on the patio, bleeding from a scraped elbow and surrounded by the wreckage of his reputation. Word travels fast in suburban Boston, especially when it involves adultery, public humiliation, and a business partnership in jeopardy. By Monday morning, my phone was buzzing with calls from mutual friends, neighbors, and even Vanessa's colleagues at the law firm. I was at my desk at TechFlow Dynamics, trying to focus on a product redesign, when my assistant knocked on my office door. Ethan, your wife's online too. She sounds upset. I almost corrected her, ex-wife, soon to be, but picked up the phone instead. What do you want, Vanessa? What did you do? Her voice was shrill with panic. My boss called me into her office this morning. Someone sent her copies of my text messages. I leaned back in my chair, feeling a grim satisfaction. I have no idea what you're talking about. Don't lie to me, Ethan. Margaret Chen from the Ethics Committee wants to see me this afternoon. They're talking about a conduct review. The Massachusetts Bar Association takes a dim view of lawyers who use deception and fraud in their personal lives. It reflects poorly on the profession, they say. I'd learned this interesting fact during my research over the weekend. Maybe you should have thought about professional consequences before you decided to cheat on your husband. This is my career, Ethan, my livelihood. You can't destroy my life because you're angry. I didn't destroy anything. You did that yourself when you walked out Thursday night. The line went quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller, more desperate. The kids called last night. Dylan asked when I'm coming home. The mention of our children hit me like a physical blow. I'd been so focused on the betrayal, the anger, the need for justice, that I'd almost forgotten the two innocent victims in this mess. What did you tell him? That Mommy and Daddy need some time apart. But he's not stupid, Ethan. He knows something's wrong. Then maybe you should have considered that before you threw our family away. I hung up and stared out my office window at the parking lot below. Julia's car was there. She'd started meeting me for lunch most days, partly for mutual support, and partly because we'd become genuine friends through this nightmare. My phone buzzed with a text from her. Michael's office called. He's been suspended pending an investigation into misuse of company funds. David's furious. The hotel rooms, the expensive dinners, the weekend trips, all charged to Michael's company credit card as business expenses. What had seemed like romantic gestures were actually embezzlement, and David's real estate firm was now facing potential legal liability. At lunch, Julia looked exhausted but determined. I met with my lawyer this morning. The divorce should be final within 60 days. That fast? Adultery expedites the process in Massachusetts. Plus, Michael's not fighting it. His lawyer advised him to settle quickly and quietly. I picked at my sandwich, thinking about the conversation with Vanessa. She's facing an ethics review at work. Good. Actions have consequences. The kids are asking questions. I need to bring them home soon and explain what's happening. Julia reached across the table and squeezed my hand. They'll be okay. Kids are resilient, and they have you. That afternoon, I drove to New Hampshire to pick up Dylan and Chloe. My parents' house sat on a small lake, surrounded by pine trees and the kind of peace that felt impossible back in the suburbs. The kids ran to me as soon as I pulled into the driveway, their faces bright with excitement. Dad! Chloe launched herself into my arms. Grandpa taught me how to fish. I caught 3, Dylan added proudly. Well, Grandpa helped, but I did most of it. My mother appeared on the porch, her expression carefully neutral. How are you holding up? Better than expected, worse than I'd hoped. The children have been asking about Vanessa. We've been telling them she's working on an important case, but I know. I'll talk to them tonight. The drive home was filled with chatter about fishing and hiking and the baby deer they'd seen in Grandpa's backyard. Normal kid conversation that made my chest ache with the knowledge that their world was about to change forever. After dinner, After homework was done and toys were put away, I sat both kids down on the couch in our living room. "I need to tell you something important," I began, choosing my words carefully. "Mommy and I are having some problems, and we're going to live in different houses for a while." Dylan's face crumpled immediately. "Are you getting divorced?" The question hung in the air like smoke. I'd prepared for this moment, rehearsed what I would say, but looking at my son's worried face made the words stick in my throat. "Yes, buddy, we are." Chloe didn't understand the word, but she understood the tone. She climbed into my lap and buried her face in my shirt. "Is it because of us?" Dylan asked, his voice small and scared. "No," I said firmly, pulling him close. "This has nothing to do with you two. Sometimes grown-ups make choices that hurt the people they love, and that's what happened here. But you are the best thing that ever happened to me, and I will always, always love you." "Will we still see Mommy?" "Of course. She loves you very much, and she'll always be your mother. We're just not going to be married anymore." The questions came in waves. Where would they live? Would they have to change schools? What about Christmas and birthdays and family vacations? I answered as honestly as I could, promising them that their lives would be as normal as possible, despite the chaos their mother had created. Later, after they were asleep, I sat in my kitchen with a beer and thought about the strange turns my life had taken. A week ago, I'd been a married suburban dad with a mortgage and a minivan. Now I was a single father planning a custody battle with a woman I barely recognized. My phone buzzed with a text from Julia. "How did it go with the kids?" "About as well as expected. How are you doing?" "Michael came by tonight, wanted to work things out. I told him to communicate through lawyers from now on." "Good for you." "Ethan? Thank you for everything. I couldn't have gotten through this without you." I stared at the message for a long time before responding. "Same here. We make a good team." It was true. Julia had become my closest ally in this war, the one person who understood exactly what I was going through. But as I sat alone in my quiet house, I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't done yet. Vanessa and Michael had started this fight, but they weren't going down without swinging back. I was right to be worried. 2 weeks later, everything went to hell. I was at Dylan's soccer game on a Saturday morning, cheering from the sidelines with the other parents, when my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something made me answer. "Is this Ethan Jarrett?" The voice was official, clipped. "Yes, who's this?" "Detective Maria Santos, Boston Police. We need to talk about your children." The world tilted sideways. "What about my children?" "They're safe, but there's been an incident. Can you come to the station on Berkeley Street?" I left Dylan's game at halftime, my mind racing through terrible possibilities. The drive into the city passed in a blur of traffic and panic until I found myself sitting across from Detective Santos in a sterile interview room. "Your ex-wife filed a report this morning," she said, consulting her notes. "Claims you've been threatening her, that she's afraid for her safety and the safety of your children." "That's insane. I haven't threatened anyone." "She provided recordings of phone calls where you allegedly made violent statements. Also claims you've been stalking her, following her to work, harassing her friends." I stared at the detective, trying to process what I was hearing. "None of that is true. I haven't even spoken to her except about custody arrangements." "She also alleges that you've been drinking heavily, that the children aren't safe in your care." The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. "This is about the custody hearing next week, isn't it? She's trying to get ahead of it." "Mr. Jarrett, these are serious allegations." "They're lies." I pulled out my phone. "Every conversation I've had with Vanessa has been through text or email, on my lawyer's advice. I can show you everything." Detective Santos reviewed the messages, her expression growing skeptical as she read. The texts were all business. Pickup times, school events, basic coordination. Nothing threatening, nothing that suggested instability. What about the recordings she provided? I'd like to hear them. She played the audio files on her laptop. My blood ran cold as I heard my own voice, apparently threatening to make her pay and destroy her life. But something was wrong. The words were mine, but the context was all wrong. That's from a conversation I had with my friend Pete, I said slowly. We were talking about a video game. She's edited it to make it sound like I was talking about her. You're sure about that? Completely. Pete Kowalski, he's a mechanic in Somerville. Call him. An hour later, after Pete had confirmed my story and Detective Santos had listened to the original, unedited recording, I was free to go. But the damage was done. Vanessa had bought herself time and cast doubt on my character. I called Julia from the parking lot. She's getting desperate, Julia said when I explained what had happened. Michael tried something similar last week, claimed I was having an affair with you, that I was an unfit mother. Are you kidding me? His lawyer withdrew the motion when mine threatened to countersue for defamation, but it shows they're coordinating their attacks. That afternoon, I picked up the kids from Vanessa's parents' house, where they'd been staying during the custody evaluation. Margaret looked embarrassed when she answered the door. Ethan, I'm so sorry about this morning. Vanessa told us you'd been acting erratically, but I never believed you'd hurt the children. She's lying, Margaret, about all of it. I know. Her voice was barely a whisper. I've been watching her these past weeks, and she's not the daughter I raised. The things she's saying about you, the way she's acting, I don't know what happened to her. Dylan and Chloe were quiet on the drive home, sensing the tension even if they didn't understand it. That evening, as I helped Chloe with her bath, she asked the question I'd been dreading. Daddy, why is Mommy saying mean things about you? I knelt beside the bathtub, choosing my words carefully. Sometimes when people are hurt and angry, they say things that aren't true. Mommy is sad about our divorce, and she's not thinking clearly. But you're not mean. You make me pancakes and read me stories. Thank you, sweetheart. I love you very much, and I would never do anything to hurt you or Dylan. Later that night, after the kids were asleep, I called my lawyer. She's getting desperate, Carol Martinez said when I explained the day's events. The custody evaluation isn't going her way, and she knows it. This was a Hail Mary pass. What happens now? We document everything. The false police report actually works in our favor. It shows a pattern of deception and manipulation. No judge wants to award custody to a parent who files false accusations. And the hearing? Still on for Friday. Be prepared for her to try something else between now and then. I was right to be worried. Wednesday evening, I was helping Dylan with his math homework when there was a knock at the front door. Through the peephole, I could see Vanessa standing on my porch with Michael beside her. I opened the door, but left the chain on. What do you want? We need to talk, Vanessa said. Her eyes were red-rimmed and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. Please, Ethan, let us in. Absolutely not. If you want to communicate, do it through lawyers. The kids are my children too, she said, her voice rising. I have a right to see them. You have supervised visitation on weekends. That's what the court ordered. Michael stepped forward then, and I could smell alcohol on his breath. You self-righteous piece of... Michael. Vanessa put a hand on his arm. Please. No, I'm tired of this guy acting like he's better than us. Like he's never made a mistake. I never cheated on my wife and destroyed my family, I said calmly. That's a pretty big mistake to avoid. You think you're so perfect, Michael slurred. But you're nothing. A nobody with a boring job and a boring life. Vanessa deserves better. Apparently she thought so too. How's that working out for her? Michael lunged forward, but the chain held the door. His shoulder hit the frame hard, and he stumbled backward. I'm calling the police, I said, pulling out my phone. Wait, Vanessa said desperately. Please, just listen. We can work this out, all of us. Julia doesn't have to know. Julia's my friend. Unlike you, I don't lie to my friends. Your friend? Michael's voice was ugly with insinuation. Is that what we're calling it? I looked at both of them, my wife of 10 years and her lover, drunk and desperate on my doorstep, and felt nothing but pity. Go home, Vanessa. Sleep it off. And next time you want to see your children, follow the court order. I closed the door and called the police anyway, just to document the incident. By the time they arrived, Vanessa and Michael were gone, but the officer took my statement and added it to the growing file. Friday morning arrived gray and rainy, matching my mood as I sat in the courthouse waiting for our custody hearing. Carol sat beside me, reviewing her notes one final time. Remember, let her hang herself, she said quietly. Don't react to whatever accusations she makes. The evidence speaks for itself. Vanessa arrived with her lawyer, a sharp-faced woman in an expensive suit. She looked composed, professional, nothing like the desperate woman who'd shown up drunk at my door 2 nights earlier. The hearing was a masterclass in destruction. Carol methodically presented evidence of Vanessa's affair, her lies to the police, her attempts to manipulate the system. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, listened with growing disapproval. When Vanessa took the stand, she tried to paint herself as a victim, a woman trapped in a loveless marriage who'd made one mistake and was being punished disproportionately. But under cross-examination, the lies unraveled. Mrs. Jarrett, you testified that your affair was a spontaneous mistake, but these text messages show weeks of planning. Can you explain the discrepancy? It's complicated. You also filed a false police report against your husband. Do you consider that protecting your children's best interests? I was scared. Of a man who had never threatened you, never been violent, never given you any reason to fear for your safety. The final blow came when Carol played the edited audio recordings Vanessa had provided to police, followed immediately by the original unedited versions. Your Honor, these recordings were deliberately manipulated to make my client appear threatening. This represents a calculated attempt to deceive law enforcement and this court. The judge's expression was thunderous. Mrs. Jarrett, I've seen many custody disputes in my courtroom, but rarely have I encountered such a deliberate pattern of deception and manipulation. Your actions show a concerning disregard for the truth and for your children's well-being. The ruling was swift and decisive. I was awarded primary custody, with Vanessa receiving supervised visitation every other weekend. The judge also ordered her to undergo counseling and parenting classes before any expansion of her custody rights would be considered. As we left the courthouse, Vanessa tried one last desperate appeal. Ethan, please, I know I made mistakes, but I'm still their mother. Don't take my children away from me. I stopped and looked at her, really looked at her, for what I knew would be the last time as anything more than a co-parent. I didn't take them away, Vanessa. You gave them up the night you walked out that door and chose someone else over your family. This is just the paperwork catching up to reality. 3 months later, I thought the worst was behind us. Dylan and Chloe had settled into our new routine. Their weekend visits with Vanessa were going smoothly, and I'd even started dating again. Nothing serious, just coffee with a woman from Dylan's school who'd made it clear she was interested. Julia and I had remained close friends throughout the aftermath. Her divorce had been finalized, Michael had moved to Florida to start over, and she'd gotten the house plus a generous settlement. We met for lunch at least once a week, comparing notes on single parenthood and celebrating our freedom from toxic marriages. That's why I was completely unprepared for what happened on a sunny Saturday in June. I was hosting a neighborhood barbecue, something I'd never done while married to Vanessa, who always found reasons to avoid our neighbors. The backyard was full of families from Dylan's school and Chloe's soccer team, kids running around with water balloons, while parents clustered around picnic tables laden with food. Julia was there with her 2 kids, helping me manage the chaos and laughing at my attempts to grill burgers without burning them. It was the kind of afternoon I'd dreamed about during the dark days of the divorce. Normal, happy, peaceful. Then Vanessa and Michael showed up. They came through the side gate like they owned the place, both dressed to impress and clearly having coordinated their arrival. Conversations died as our neighbors recognized the drama walking into their midst. "What are you doing here?" I asked, stepping between them and the kids. "These are my children's friends," Vanessa said loudly, her voice carrying across the yard. "I have every right to be here." "You have supervised visitation rights. This isn't your weekend and this isn't supervision." Michael stepped forward, and I could see he'd been drinking. "We're here to expose the truth about you and your little girlfriend." He pointed at Julia, who had gone pale but stood her ground. "Everyone should know what kind of man they're letting around their children." "Michael, don't," Julia said quietly. "No, they deserve to know. This whole divorce, this whole sob story about betrayed spouses, it's all a lie. They've been having an affair for months." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. I could feel every eye in the yard on us, parents pulling their children closer, the festive atmosphere evaporating. "That's not true," I said calmly, but my heart was pounding. "Isn't it?" Vanessa pulled out her phone. "We have pictures, hotel receipts, evidence of your relationship going back to before either divorce was filed." I realized with growing horror what they were doing. They'd manufactured evidence, just like Vanessa had done with the audio recordings. Fake hotel receipts, doctored photos, a complete fabrication designed to destroy both Julia and me in front of our community. "Show them," Michael said, grabbing Vanessa's phone. "Show them what kind of hypocrites they really are." But as he waved the phone in the air, his coordination betrayed him. The device slipped from his drunken fingers and clattered onto the concrete patio, the screen shattering into a spiderweb of cracks. "You idiot!" Vanessa lunged for the phone, but it was too late. The impact had corrupted the files, and the screen was unreadable. "It doesn't matter," she said desperately, turning to address the crowd. "We have copies. We have proof that they've been lying to everyone, that their whole victim act is fake." "Actually," said a voice from the back of the yard, "we have proof of something else entirely." Detective Santos stepped out from behind the garden shed, followed by 2 uniformed officers. I stared in shock. I had no idea she was there. "Mrs. Turner called us this morning," Santos explained, looking at Vanessa and Michael. "She was concerned about threats you'd made regarding this event. We've been monitoring the situation." "Monitoring how?" I asked. Julia stepped forward, pulling a small device from her purse. "I've been recording everything since they arrived, including their admission that they fabricated evidence to frame us." The blood drained from Vanessa's face as she realized what had happened. "You can't use that. It's entrapment." "Actually, it's perfectly legal," Santos said. "Massachusetts is a one-party consent state, and what we heard constitutes conspiracy to commit fraud, filing false police reports, and harassment." The next few minutes were a blur of handcuffs and Miranda rights as both Vanessa and Michael were arrested in front of the entire neighborhood. The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd come to destroy my reputation and ended up destroying themselves instead. As the police cars pulled away, the barbecue guests began to disperse, shaking their heads and whispering among themselves. But several neighbors approached me before leaving. "I'm sorry you had to deal with that," said Karen from across the street. "For what it's worth, we never believed their story anyway." "Your kids are great," added Tom from 2 houses down. "If you ever need anything, just ask." After everyone left, Julia and I sat on my back porch watching our children play in the yard. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "How long have you been planning this?" I asked. "Since Wednesday. Vanessa called me, drunk and ranting about how she was going to expose us. I contacted Detective Santos, and she suggested we let them incriminate themselves." "The recording device?" "Police issue. Santos wanted everything documented properly this time." I shook my head in amazement. "What happens now?" "Santos says they'll likely plead down to misdemeanors, harassment, filing false reports, probably community service and fines. But their reputations are finished. And the kids? Vanessa's parents are filing for emergency custody of her visitation rights. They're horrified by her behavior. They want to maintain a relationship with Dylan and Chloe, but they don't trust their daughter anymore. We sat in comfortable silence, watching our children play together in the fading light. Dylan was teaching Julia's son how to throw a football, while Chloe and Julia's daughter chased fireflies across the grass. "You know what the funny thing is?" Julia said eventually. "What's that?" "They were so convinced we were having an affair, they made it sound pretty appealing." I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in months. Somewhere along the way, my ally in divorce had become something more. A friend, a confidant, someone who understood exactly what I'd been through because she'd been through it too. "Julia." "I know," she said softly. "I've been thinking the same thing. But I wanted to wait until all this was over, until we could be sure it was real and not just shared trauma. And now," she smiled, the same warm smile that had gotten me through the darkest days of my divorce. "Now I think we should find out." 6 months later, Julia and I were married in a small ceremony in her backyard, surrounded by our children and the friends who'd stood by us through the chaos. Dylan walked Chloe down the aisle, both of them beaming with pride at their new blended family. Vanessa didn't attend, obviously. She was in court-mandated therapy and working as a paralegal, her law license suspended pending a disciplinary review. Michael had moved to Arizona and was selling insurance, his real estate career destroyed by the scandal. But their absence didn't diminish our joy. If anything, it highlighted how much better our lives had become without their toxic influence. As I watched Julia say her vows, promising to love and cherish our combined family, I thought about the night Vanessa had walked out our door. She'd said she deserved better, that she needed to understand herself. She was right about one thing: she did deserve exactly what she got.